Hi everyone, and welcome to Financial Basics, where today we're going to be talking about combining finances with your partner. So deciding to join finances with your partner is a huge financial decision, and there are so many people out there that don't make this decision with a lot of pre-thought. A lot of the time they're going into this situation where the one I hear a lot is your lease is expiring and your lovely partner offers to let you stay with them or start living together, and then all of a sudden 3 months in, 6 months in, you've realized actually we're a lot more entangled in terms of our finances than what I originally set out to do. So before you make this decision, first please make it a conscious decision, something that you decide together to do. Don't go 6 months in, a year later, you realize actually all of a sudden I'm paying half of this and I'm paying some of that bill and this bill. And if you do it in a conscientious way where you're really making that decision, it makes everything else so much easier along the road and down the road. So we'll start with just the first thing, deciding to actually join finances. Are you and your partner ready to do this? Are you on the same page financially? And the things that I look at is, at what stage are you in your relationship? What are your financial goals and values? Are they the same as your partner? What are your spending habits? Are you a spender or a saver, and what are their spending habits? Do you even at this point in the relationship have a realistic understanding of what your partner is like with money? What debts or savings or investments are you bringing to the partnership, to the relationship, if you're looking at combining finances? And then please do this. Build a budget together, or at least start looking at how to build a budget together before you combine finances. It is so important to do that. And the challenge here, so someone like Dave Ramsey will come in and say, day one, day you get married, that's when you combine finances. And in my view, that's very unrealistic, at least in some aspects, because if you're living together, you are combining finances to some extent. If you are in a relationship, even, you are combining finances to some extent. If you go to dinner, do you split the bill 50-50? Do you cover it fully and then they'll maybe get the next one? What is actually going on with the money on that level, where you can sit there and say, okay, this is the plan, this is what I'm agreeing to, actively agreeing to, in terms of my involvement. So build that budget together, sit down, look at your money, decide in advance what you are comfortable with. Make sure that you're on the same page financially. You really don't want to be doing it on day one of your marriage. So be very careful how you approach this and make sure that you're on the same page before you even look at this as an option. And if you don't believe you are ready to combine finances, then you shouldn't be, for example, living together. Then this is a decision that you need to really think about. So there's a couple of options for actually managing combining finances. And the most common way, and I like to describe it as you tripped into it almost, is I'll cover this bill and they'll cover that bill. So I call it ad hoc, where you're basically on an ad hoc basis trying to cover the bills as they come up. Whoever has the money, whoever's available to do it, or whatever the case may be, you go shopping and one person gets it, then the next week somebody else gets it. Or another common one that often happens once things start settling down and you've combined finances for a while is one person ends up paying for the mortgage and the other person pays for the household bills. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can also split bills 50-50. So at some point after the ad hoc phase, after you've already gotten into this, you decide, actually, you know what, we're just going to split bills 50-50. That's quite a common thing, where you just sort of work out what your expenses were for each budgetary period, or you even estimate what your bills are going to be, and then you base your expenses on that and you split everything as best you can along those lines. There's also the option of setting up a shared account. So your incomes directly go into that account, or one step away from that is you set up a third separate account that just covers the household bills, and you both contribute towards that one account. And this can develop quite a few problems because each one feels maybe a little bit hurt, if you want to say, but differently depending on which side you are in terms of if you earn more money or if you earn less money. So this can cause problems. And then my personal favorite, and the one that I use, splitting all bills in proportion to your income between you and your partner. So it's proportional budgeting, proportionally splitting your expenses. So the ad hoc method, obviously most relationships start out this way. You just end up splitting bills in proportion, ad hoc, on the fly, winging it kind of approach, and then all of a sudden you're 6 months in, a year in, multiple years in, and you're realizing, you know what, this is actually a crazy way, and I don't really have line of sight on my expenses and my bills and what I'm actually being responsible for. And a good example of this is I'll cover one of the utilities and they'll cover the other one, or I'll cover mortgage and they'll cover all the household expenses. And the challenge with that is, you might be in a mortgage that's got a fixed term, a fixed interest rate for the next decade, which means if you're only covering the mortgage, potentially for the next 10 years or 15 years, you might not even have to worry about inflation. Like, it's all fixed, you don't know exactly what your bills are going to be, and then your partner who's covering the household expenses has to deal with 10% or 20%. If you're looking at specifically food, there's been years where it's as high as 20-30% in a single year, particularly if you've got things like maybe a higher end food budget or clothes, whatever the case may be. If there's a child gets added to that house, the household bills just absolutely explode, and you have to manage that very carefully. And if your one partner is sitting there going, no, I cover the mortgage, that doesn't often fly, and it creates a huge amount of tension in the relationship. There's also very little opportunity to reconcile your bills and actually look at what you're spending and figure out, if you've done this ad hoc approach, who's actually paid for what. So the one person says, yeah, I covered electricity this month and you covered it last month, but what happened the month before? And you're kind of sitting there like trying to figure out who paid for what over the long term. And this becomes really a critical thing when you're looking at investments and assets. Who actually contributed to investments, for example? That is a huge problem, because now all of a sudden the lines are blurred on that investment in terms of who owns it. There's also almost no opportunity to pre-plan and really budget in advance. So two of the key pillars for budgeting, I would say, is things like long-term things that you want to do. So if you've got a big expense coming up in 6 months' time or 9 months' time, how do you plan for that if you're doing ad hoc? And the other one is just really sitting down and trying to figure out, if you've got like a holiday coming up, or you've got a car, or you want to buy a car, or fix the roof, or upgrade a house, anything like that becomes really difficult when you're dealing with bigger things to actually tackle them appropriately in your budgets. So the 50-50 approach, and I did mention this earlier, each partner simply agrees to pay 50%. And you can do this with an equal split, or you can combine everything into a separate account. Both partners contribute what they think is what the expenses will be, or what their half of the expenses will be. And this results in several issues, but some of the key ones: for the higher earner, you end up with some sort of lifestyle limitation. I can't buy the nice car because the monthly payment is going to be really high. That's going to get added to the 50-50 bills, and now my partner can't keep up and can't pay for that car payment. So the higher earner is now limited in what they might want to buy if they had the option. And the lower earner has the opposite problem. Oh my gosh, I have to keep up with the higher earner. And what you'll find if you really dig into this is a lot of the time with a 50-50 split, one of the two partners gets into debt. That is the issue. At its core, that is a huge problem for the lower earner. They will get into debt and the partners together try and solve that. Or secondly, they get into debt secretly and you find out 3 months later they've got a £30,000 or $30,000 balance on one of their credit cards that they've sort of kept secret from you. So it affects each partner differently, but it's definitely something to just be very wary of in terms of how you approach that, especially if there's a big discrepancy between income levels for each partner. The one-part system, combine all your money into a single pot, and then all of your expenses, all of the household bills flow out of that account. Your mortgage flows out of that, your investments flow out of that, everything flows out of this account. You've only got your joint accounts. All expenses are covered obviously, but it blurs the lines on who is actually paying for what. So it becomes very difficult to actually figure out how much you're paying, how much you own for each of the various assets, right? And again, you have the same problem with personal expenses. Do you actually want to cover the new car? Your partner's gone and bought a new car or wants to go buy a new car. Is that something you want to deal with in your finances? Is it a personal expense? Does the family need it? That's something now you've almost opted out of being able to discuss it because of this one-part system. So it becomes much harder to actually go, you know what, I'm using the car as an example, but it could be a lot smaller than that. And they go out and buy a new suit, or they buy a new computer or a new gaming system for their, like a new PS5 or whatever the case may be. And no, it's not that big of an expense, but because it's combined expenses, all of a sudden you're in a situation where your income is now going towards that as an individual, and you don't know how much of that you own or whether you even wanted to participate. Proportional budgeting, this is my favorite. This is the one I absolutely love. I'm a huge fan of it. And it's extremely effective at just making sure, one, that you can track everything, and two, that each partner is affected by the bills that come in equally. So let's just talk about that, because that's a huge topic, huge thing here. The first thing is your savings rate and your expenses rate will be the same for each partner. And we can go into detail on the example that I will be showing later in this video. Obviously, there are limitations that do get mentioned, but they do not affect proportional budgeting. So the time period, it doesn't matter. This could be done over once every 3 months. This could be done once a month. This could be done every 2 weeks. It could be done every paycheck. Because you're looking at a time period that goes from A to B, that could be over 6 months. And the way you're tracking your expenses, you're doing expense-based budgeting, which means you're deriving your expenses from your balances in your bank accounts, and that means that you get a lot more flexibility. In terms of assets and investments, you can absolutely use this approach to track precisely what portion of everything you own, because you're tracking what you actually contributed to everything in the ratio for your income. And you also get to do something which is fantastic for new people that are starting looking at combining finances in a meaningful way, in a precise way. You can decide step by step. You can take your bank balance and line item by line item decide what you want to include and what you want to exclude in terms of this portion of the budgeting. So let's say two people, completely separate finances, and they wanted to start with just a phone bill. They could do that. You could take a phone bill, you could split that phone bill in proportion to your income and just go, going forward, our phone bill will be covered directly in proportion to our income, and we're going to be looking at everything as a single item. And what that allows is it opens the door to be able to fully discuss everything in your budget. And if you want to talk about being overwhelmed by building a budget and starting this whole process, you can do it a little bit at a time. You can do it in increments as opposed to all in one go. Now, I do hear a complaint. It's unfair to a partner that pays more, but the flip side of that is it hurts the same. Because the ratios are the same, it ultimately means you each pay an exact amount, but the same ratio, right? So this the exact same ratio, and then everything just balances. So you end up with an expense ratio or an expense percentage of your income being equal to each other. Even if one person earns 10,000 and the other earns 2,000, they're going to be splitting their expenses proportionally. And the same with their savings rates, which is the opposite of that, the flip side of that. They're going to be saving at the exact same ratios. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, it allows you to build trust because you can do it one item at a time. That suit that you just bought, I don't want to actually be involved in that. He can pay for that on his own. I'm going to exclude that from the combined expenses. Telephone bills, I'm fine to pay that. Mortgage, I'm fine to pay that. So you get the car payment, it was fine until you went and bought the Porsche or whatever the case may be. No, the Porsche payment is a separate thing. I've decided to exclude the Porsche payment because he was perfectly happy on the VW or whatever he had before. And what this allows you to do specifically, there's a couple of things. It allows you to track your retirements very precisely and what portion of the overall retirements you own. It allows you to track your property, how much you've actually contributed to that property, and what percentage of the property you own precisely. Same with investments. Same with any debts. And there's two types of debts here. You have to look at historical debt and you have to look at debt that you're currently accumulating. And what I mean by that is, let's say in the last month your credit card went up by 1,000. Okay, let's just track that. Let's just figure out exactly what portion of that I need to pay, what portion you need to pay. And then there's historical debt as well. So you can decide collectively, do we want to tackle this historical debt as a team if one partner brought this debt to the relationship? If they showed up with 5,000 in credit card debt, the question for you is, do you want to tackle that together or separately? There's also, it's very easy to track and monitor your spending, even in situations where you are spending more than you earn. How do you actually handle that? If you spend more than you earn in any one period, how does proportional budgeting handle that? And we'll go through that in the example. But fundamentally, it just tracks it, splits it proportionately, and each person has to potentially dig into savings to cover that expense, again in proportion to their income. And then divorce, or if you and your partner split up or break up for whatever reason, you're covered here as well, because you have a spreadsheet, or you have a sheet where you can say, I own 43.25% of the property. We're going to sell the property and I'm going to take 42% of the proceeds, or we're going to value the property and the other partner is going to pay me out that 42%. So let's just go into the example. So we'll just run through some of these numbers. You're tracking your bank balance at the start of the period, at the end of the period, and we're tracking your income during that period. So we're looking at just date 1, date 2, partner 1, partner 2, and we're looking at those values. It's really easy to do. You look at your bank statement, you look at the start of the month, you look at the end of the month, or end and start of the period, and you go, okay, you write those numbers down, and you add one more number. What did I earn over that period? And now, once you have those three numbers, you can calculate your expenses. You can calculate your combined expenses and your income, and you can work out all your ratios from that. Just those three numbers. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to look at every single line item in your bank statement. You don't have to go, what was the mortgage again? You don't have to go, how much did we spend on the car payment? How much did we spend on food? How much did we spend on any of those things? What were our phone bills? Doesn't matter. You don't have to dig into detail unless you absolutely want to, or you're trying to figure out a way to control your expenses or limit your expenses or cut. If you're happy with what your expenses were, then you can simply go, this is what I started with, this is what I ended with, and this is how much I earned, and therefore I can calculate my expenses from that. So for these two partners, let's just go through partner 1. Start of the period, they had 1,000 in the bank balance. At the end of the period, they had 2,000 in the bank balance, and their income over that period was 3,000, which means calculating their expenses over that period, you can see it was 2,000. For partner 2, similar numbers, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, and they spent 5,000. So combined, they spent 7,000 and they earned 9,000. If you look at their expenses, it was 2,000 to 5,000. But let's just calculate what they should have spent. So the way you're calculating that is you're taking the 7,000 and you're just splitting it in proportion to income. And what you'll see is it's 2,333 versus 4,666. You can now compare that to the 2,000 and the 5,000, what they actually spent versus what they should have spent. And you can see that there's a 333 discrepancy. So that 333 discrepancy is actually a physical payment that partner 1 will do for partner 2 into partner 2's account to rebalance the payments. If they do that, then in reality, they have spent 2,000 plus the 333 that they've transferred. Partner 2 has spent 5,000 minus the 333, which gets them to the 4,666. Their combined savings was 2,000. So you can see there, partner 1, and that was after the transfer. Partner 1 ended up saving 666. Partner 2 ended up saving 1,333, which means their expense ratios and their income, savings ratios are identical to each other. They managed to spend 77% of their income and they saved 22% of their income. So what are they doing with that extra 2,000 now that they have, right? 1,350 of that, they've decided to invest that in shares, right? In a portfolio some way. And they're gonna deal with that also in proportion to their income, which means partner 1 is going to contribute 450 and partner 2 is going to contribute 900, right? So I'm including here just the formulas for that entire spreadsheet. And now we can look at the actual portfolio. Where did that investment go? Where did the investment money go? So here we have partner 1 and partner 2's financial portfolio, right? Their investments. Partner 1, at the time that they're merging their money, Partner 1 had 50,000 in shares and partner 2 had 50,000 in shares. They're deciding to combine it now. They have 80,000 in shares. So you can calculate precisely what the ratios were for each partner. So at that point in time, partner 1 owned 37.5% of the overall portfolio, partner 2 owned the rest at 62.5%. Now we bring in the 450 and the 900. So partner 1 has shifted their overall portfolio from 30,000 to 30,450. Partner 2 has gone to 50,900. So you can work out the new ratios. Combined, they have 81,350, and you can split that again in proportion to each of their total contributions plus what they've brought to it. And you can see the ratio has now changed because of that addition. It is now 37.431 versus 62.569. And you can see that all the numbers there going, okay, so the 37 and the 3,450, right? So now let's just look at this across multiple months so that we can see how it will actually work and how those numbers move forward into the next month. So those numbers now become your new amounts, right, or your new ratios, but the numbers are going to be changed because it's an investment. It's going up and down in the stock market. We get back a month later, right, 1st of January versus 1st of February, and we find out those shares, that 81,350 is now worth 85,000. What do? How do we figure out who owns what? Well, you just go back to the ratios. You plug those ratios in and you actually calculate how much each party owns of the total 85,000. And you find out that partner 1 now owns 31,816.23%. Partner 2 now owns 53,183.77, right? It's the exact same ratios that we ended on the last time. In other words, any of the growth or change in the value of the portfolio over that time period, both of the partners, in proportion to how much their investments at the start were, they both equally shared in the change in the value of that portfolio, whether it goes up or down, doesn't matter. So now you can write those two numbers down, but looking at their investments again, they are right back at it. They've got 450 and 900. They want to be consistent. They've plugged that into their investments again. And let's assume all of their expenses were the same. So now you can sit down and go, okay, their balances have changed from 31,816. You add the 450, 32,266. Same with partner 2 going from 53,183 to 54,083. And what you can do here, you can keep track of the overall portfolio and what it's done, which is the 85,000 plus the 1,350, and you end up on 86,350. You can now work out how much each party owns of that ratio, and you can write those values down as well, and you can see it's gone from 37.431 to 37.367 for partner 1, and it's gone from 62.569 to 62.633% for partner 2. So yeah, partner 2 has gone slightly higher in terms of ownership of the overall portfolio, and partner 2 has gone slightly down in terms of percentage ownership for each partner, even between months. So it's absolutely fantastic. If you ever split or ever break up with your partner, here's the exact precise numbers where you can turn around and you can say, actually, I own 37.367% of whatever that portfolio is worth. And I've included the formulas for those calculations as well, so you can actually see that. And now I want to talk about mortgage. So the mortgage is often a big one. I'm looking at buying a house with my partner or my wife or husband. If you're married or not married, it doesn't matter. and you're sitting there going, but how the hell do I keep track of how much of that house I own and what's fair? And you write on that little piece of paper when you're filling in your mortgage papers, you go, we're going to split this 50-50, but that becomes meaningless very quickly depending on how you're actually spending your money and actually paying the mortgage. So in this situation, partner 1 brought 40,000 towards the deposit, partner 2 only brought 30,000 towards the deposit. But you can calculate exactly what those ratios are, and you can go, okay, because of that, partner 1 owns 57% of the house, and partner 2 owns 42.85% of the house. And what I've done here is I've basically calculated the interest rate, and I've broken the interest rate down to a daily amount. I've included a link there for a calculator online that will actually convert your annual interest rate into a daily interest rate. So in this example, the daily interest rate calculated came to 0.0134%. That's not multiplied by 100. That is actually 0.0134%. And you can see at 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after the 12th, thereabouts, 28th of August, partner 1 decides to add an additional 20,000 to the deposit. So in this particular situation, nowhere do the ratios change when you're not making a payment. They will only adjust when you are making a payment. So yeah, they've added the 20,000, even though the amounts are changing. They only change when somebody actually contributes towards the mortgage. And what I'm doing here, if I just go through these columns one at a time, it's the amount that each partner is putting in the moment, the absolute amount, which is the total amount of funds contributed by that person. Then I've included the effective amount, which is the absolute amount with the time value of the money. So 40,000 on day 1, on the 12th of August, is actually, even though no more contributions have been added, it's actually worth 40,536 the next day, because the time value of that money means that it's worth more. Same with partner 2. So you can look at both the absolute value and you can look at the effective amounts. So that 20,000 being added 2 weeks later means that it's not actually worth, you can't line it up with the 40,000. You now have to line it up with what the 40,000 was worth after 2 weeks, which is 40,080. So that's why you have to keep track of your interest rate on a daily basis and at each point that you contribute towards the mortgage. And you can see the ratios instantly change at that moment from the 57 and the 42 to 66 and 33. I'm also including the formulas there. It looks complicated, but it's actually really straightforward. Just looking at what proportion you each own, looking at combining the sums, and tying that all back to your interest rates. So what I've done here is I've also included a couple of normal mortgage payments that just occur. So I've got a mortgage payment happening on the 17th of October and the 10th of November. They were each contributing 1,000 towards the mortgage payment. And you can see how the ratios change on the back of that mortgage payment, obviously, going from 66 through to, 66.65 to 66.29, and the other party going from 33.34 to 33.7 on the first payment that happened on the 17th of October, that sheet. So the other thing I'm going to talk about here is This is a calculator to determine where you're tracking next to your retirement goals. So what are your investments actually doing relative to what you're aiming for, right? So what I've got here is a simple calculator to figure out if you are on track to be able to retire, or if you're actually behind, or if you're actually ahead. So what you're looking at here really simply is a lot of people worry in their minds that they are not, they're behind in terms of retirement. And it's actually quite scary, and so few people go and actually do the maths, do the calculation to work out precisely where am I tracking. And what you're doing here is you're simply taking an estimate of what the market's going to do. For this particular example, I've estimated 8.5%. And you go, okay, I want to retire at 65, so I've got 65 years from birth to work up to grow that investment, whatever it is. And then you can simply sit and you can go, okay, line by line, number by number, am I behind or am I ahead for my age, based on what my goal is. So here, for example, he wants to, the person wants to live on 4,000 a month when they retire. Then they're going to need, based on the 4% rule, they're going to need 1.2 million, or to get 48,000 a year out safely on a sustainable rate. And at birth, so at 0, you need roughly 5,000. So if you invested, if you have 5,000 invested at year 0, then you are technically ready to not retire, because you still need to retire at 65, but you don't have to add any additional contributions to your retirement if you don't want to. And if you have no intention of retiring early or putting that date forward by building a bigger portfolio sooner, then you can just let that sit and grow. And if you did that from birth, you would end up with 1 million or 1.2 million, 5,000 around there. The really interesting thing here, when I did these calculations, and I think that shocked me the most when I did this calculation, was just the quick touch. I'll just mention it briefly. The fact that if you have if you're ever pregnant or having a child, this is one of the greatest things that you could ever do for them. There is and this is compound interest doing its magic, there is a 200 multiple on the years between 0 and 65 if you have an 8.5% return on investment per year. So any amount that you can put into an investment for your child when they are born, when they turn 65, it'll multiply 200 times over, which means $100 or $1,000 will become 200,000. 5,000 will become 1 million. 6,000, 5,900 will become 1.2 million. So you get an enormous compounding growth by just letting that money sit. And what I always suggest, take as much as you can, put it into an investment in some form. The child is not allowed to touch that money for the next 65 years. They can only touch it when they retire. And at that point it becomes accessible, and you could potentially be saving your child 20% of their paychecks for the remainder of their life. In my opinion, this is a better option than saving for college or university. It is better than so many other things, buying their car or contributing a deposit for their house. You do this, you're taking a huge weight off of their financial costs for the remainder of their life, instead of something that's very short term, very initial, very set up costs is what I call it, where it's getting them the house, the car, all of the other things. This is a great way to look at generational wealth. I've included the formulas there, really straightforward. It's just 65 minus the age, and you can do this on an annual basis, like a yearly basis. You can say, okay, no, they're 0 years old, but you can also break it down to a monthly basis as well. It's really easy to do that, where you're looking at, so my child is 6 months old. Okay, well, how much would I need to put away for them to have $1 million or 1.2 million in when they turn 65? So you can work that out precisely. So there's the formulas. So yes, here I am doing it on a monthly basis, where you can actually calculate exactly at each stage. And there's those formulas as well, I'm including that. So in summary, combining finances is a really complicated thing to do. It's something that should be a conscientious decision, an active decision that you decide to do collectively. You should be agreeing on goals and in agreement on what your goals are, what your aims are, where your focus is. Make sure that that's aligned before you do any of the numbers. Before you even look at a number, make sure that you're on the same page in terms of your goals. And then look at the numbers. The numbers will naturally flow. If you've been honest in the conversation, then it is really easy to look at that as well. If you like this video, please feel free to subscribe or like and share it. If there's anything you think I missed, or if there's any topic or questions that you have from this video, it would be great if you could send me an email or drop a comment. Please feel free to ask me. Thank you very much for listening to this video. I really appreciate it. Have a great one. See you next time. Thank you. Bye.